So we're in Kansas, and we're going to have a Denver 7 reporter here on Sunday.
Right.
And we had to get her to see birds 4 hours down the road in Kansas because Colorado has less than 200 birds left. Now, Kansas border from chicken habitat in Colorado is only a few miles away. And a few more miles from that border inside of Kansas is where the majority of the sand sagebrush chickens are, right? Tate Ranch area.
Right.
So basic idea is that we have the renewable development happening in eastern Colorado, and they're definitely plowing through chicken habitat in order to get this built, right? That's the transmission that they're putting in, that's the wind towers, that's the solar, the battery storage, the whole kit and caboodle. And we could use that as an opportunity to fund conservation in Colorado. Now, just because chickens aren't utilizing that habitat yet, or at least not as much as we would hope, that doesn't mean that they won't use it in the future.
Right.
How about, Wayne, you talk a little bit about your experience here on Hoeme Ranch and what you've seen in terms of the habitat changing since Stacy joined in with our conservation bank, and in terms of how the management has led to chicken population changes.
Sure. Well, we partnered with the Hoeme family back in 2013, I believe. Also with another family, the Gardner family down in Clark County on the Oklahoma border. And, both these operations, first of all, they're just great folks.
Yeah.
And, when we got here, they had chickens. The service's first priority was to go protect the last of the best places to have chickens. They had chickens. They had chickens because they're, really responsible livestock operators. But look, it's all about ranching here. Ranching's the priority. But when we gave them a good value proposition, that they could, work in conjunction with the chicken. They did have to, the Hoemes had to slightly modify their grazing a little bit. But when we're able to sell those credits, it was a significant infusion into the operation. And these family operations, as most ranchers and farmers know, you're not just looking at this generation, you look at multiple generations. And so, they're able to do things like retire debt, buy more infrastructure, optimize fencing using traditional fencing or wireless fencing, just put a lot more investment back in the operation to keep it going so that it's there for future operations. So, I think if Stacy was here, he would say that infusion was very meaningful to their operation. And of course, he was already a conservationist. He's kind of, unique in the sense that they were already really into conservation before he showed up. They won the Aldo Leopold Award in 2018. His sons and daughters are very much into conservation as well. So it's just been a great partnership here. And speaking of Colorado, over half the birds back about 6, 7, 8 years ago when Colorado and Kansas Wild Departments partnered, half the birds that went to Colorado came from this ranch. So he's very much a believer in supporting trying to get Colorado's population.
Get a relocation of
relocation,
birds. Yeah.
Right. Now, it didn't work out as well as everybody thought, but man, that was a really big step, and he didn't get paid for that. So he's all about expanding the range of the birds, even if it's in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So that's neat.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, and I've seen in Colorado the opportunities that are there. So we've been working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. As you know, our chicken company has about 10,000 acres worth of options in eastern Colorado. And those are clearly landowners that are open to grazing management approaches. Mm-hmm. But they're also cowboys. And they make a living off the grass that they grow. That becomes the meat that they can sell at the market, right?
Right.
Well, when Colorado Parks and Wildlife realized that we had willing landowners that were conservation minded, I got a phone call from Colorado Parks asking, hey, would you be upset if we contacted your landowners? I know you guys have an option, but you haven't closed on it. There's no conservation easement in place. There's no management plan in place. Do you think they'd be open to us paying them per acre per year to not graze? And I said, well, call and ask. Absolutely. I think that's great. Mm-hmm. And they offered them, I believe, $20 an acre per year, not to graze. They've done it for the last 2 years. And this year, John Kraft, helping us, with all the chicken prairie chicken surveys, found 2 leks that we have not seen before.
It's a good start.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
And that's in 2 years. So I think Colorado's chances are great of getting a chicken population. We just have to put the money into the ranchers' hands and make sure that they protect their ranches and make sure they don't overgraze those ranches. And once the community sees those ranchers being successful financially by pursuing these conservation projects, there may be farmers that are wanting to get their CRP into the deal.
Yeah.
Or even farmers that are aging out and the next generation isn't interested in taking it over.
Yeah.
And that could be an opportunity for new chicken habitat to come back online.
Adam, do you think that the people in Colorado at the policy level understand what an opportunity this is for the ranchers in Southeast Colorado based on what the ranchers in Kansas have been able to do, not only for the resource, the birds themselves, but for the ranch operations like Wayne was talking about?
I don't think the politicians do. I think the politicians, most of them are coming from the Front Range. That's just population and numbers, right? And I think and now I'm a Texan. I get to Colorado as much as I can, but from what I can tell, most Coloradans are spending time gazing at the mountains and they've forgotten about the prairies.
Right.
And the real working end in Colorado are the agricultural interests in eastern Colorado, right? Those are the farmers, those are the ranchers, and they are underrepresented in the General Assembly. So no, I don't think they get it. And I would like for them to take a second, listen to the ag interests, and figure out what it takes in order for them to help us avoid another listing.
Right. And you've got such great support for renewable energy in Colorado. And in this situation, you have impacts from renewables that are really negative for the remaining birds in Southeast Colorado. What do you think the people of Colorado would want to see renewable and energy and transmission do to benefit the resource of the birds?
Well, I think right now that renewable push, it creates winners and losers. And the winners are, the winners are those that are willing to sign a lease and they get the financial benefit from signing that lease. The losers are those whose land is just taken, right, through condemnation because come hell or high water, we're siting this transmission line right through your property. And the other losers are those that didn't get a chance to jump in on the transmission easements, didn't get a chance to jump in on wind leases or solar leases, and now they're just staring at blinking red lights in the middle of the night, which used to be a star-filled sky and a quiet prairie. So what I think a conservation push could do with the renewable build-out is create more winners in terms of the rural community can maintain its ranching lifestyle and actually drive value in ranching, because right now we're losing acres of prairie, not just because of the renewables push, but because of a commodities situation too, right? So usually if you have pasture land, if you can break it out, it's worth more money. Mm-hmm. But if we could have a market that valued healthy prairie, we can keep those acres from being broken out in the future. We can even convert some of those broken acres back into prairie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think this renewable push is a chance to do that.
Yeah, real quick for the listeners and viewers, this is John Pryor. He's one of our business partners in the great state of North Carolina. He's been doing mitigation longer than many of us even knew what it meant, and had a very successful business there, and was on University of North Carolina. What do they call it over there? The board, the
board of trustees.
Board of trustees. So he's been there, done that, learned a lot of lessons from John. He's a great partner. Back on this thing about winners and losers, Adam, you're right. Maybe a little different take I've got on that. Like I used to be, I'm a rancher and a conservation banker with you guys today. Before that, I was a wind energy developer.
And hell, before that, your family was oil and gas.
Right, oil and gas, right. So all
mean,
you oil and gas and wind people out there, hello. I think, the governor believes, and, obviously worked with Excel Energy and Tri-State. I mean, the renewables will deliver some cost savings to customers over time because it helps mitigate the fossil fuels. But this is the problem, right? You have, and we've seen this in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, New Mexico. The renewable resources are where the population densities are low and where farmers and ranchers live. And you're not going to build these facilities in Denver.
Right.
So you got to go build them on the Front Range. The prairie outside the Front Range. And this is the conflict, right? I think the landowners feel like, look, we had our quality of life out here. We're all pretty happy. We've been here for generations, with the exception of maybe the interstate that was built back in the 50s. Really, nothing's changed. Now, all of a sudden, you guys are saddling us because you want our resources. You may or may not be paying us enough for that. And there's an argument about that. And that's where the whole eminent domain comes in, because essentially eminent domain says the state's only willing to pay landowners X amount for something that's going to permanently affect them, either directly or indirectly. And so you've got that tension, right? And on the wildlife side, you've talked about how lesser prairie chicken was in tough shape before these developments came along. Landowners certainly weren't getting paid for anything then. And so we're trying with our program to bridge that gap. We're trying to help the landowners get paid a market rate for durable conservation, so they see things like the lesser prairie chicken as like beneficial to their families and their way of life. But we're also trying to help the renewables folks get around the uncertainty of the on and off again of the endangered species wrecking ball. That's what we're trying to do here with this bill, and we haven't done it yet, but we've done it in other places. We've done it here in Kansas. We hit down with state law, but these landowners have been rewarded, and it's facilitated renewable development quickly in our places.
So Wayne, you were saying, I've been in the environmental permitting and compliance business for, 25 plus years now. And I can say with absolutely no doubt, what any permittee wants more than anything is certainty on timing of that permit.
Yep.
And certainty on the cost of said permit.
Yep.
And that's what we can deliver with conservation banking in a way that is so badly needed. And I don't think policymakers really understand that. And I think that one of the challenges that we have as we try and educate people on the policy side, we've got a lot of people on the ranching side that absolutely love what we do and what it has benefited them and their ranching operations. And we got great rancher partners around the country. But the policymakers are slow to understand what the ranchers already know.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the key obstacles has been the degree to which the timeline with anything related to Fish and Wildlife Service on Section 10 permits.
Yep.
And that's where we as private sector permit advocates and compliance people have got an opportunity to help educate policymakers that we gotta capitalize on right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. As I've worn the hat of a wind developer, tuned into concerns of oil and gas industry going way back to my dad and grandfather in that business, and reading all the publications that came out from the various states they were operating in. And then as a conservation banker, absolutely. People, they hear about mitigation, and some of the industry folks bristle with, oh, that's expensive. And it may not be the cheapest solution, because we have to price the product to address meeting the standards set by the agencies, whether it's federal or state. And at the end of the day, what we do is we're really sophisticated real estate developers for conservation and mitigation. So, if you're trying to offset something like a prairie chicken, well, the reason you're talking about that, because there's not much habitat left. So it becomes location, location, location. And guess what? The landowners who still have the bird are smart, the ranchers. You're not going to get that for some sort of government program cost. So that's one reason it costs. But absolutely every time, if you have them pick industry developers, do you want something that costs maybe a little more than you like? Or do you want something that if you pay that cost, you get permitting certainty every time they pick permitting certainty. They want to know that they can get it within X months, not years, and the cost is going to be locked in until they transact. You're absolutely right. We've seen that time, and y'all have seen it on wetlands and streams. I've seen it on the American burying beetle in East Oklahoma, my East Texas partners, and we've lived it on the prairie chicken together.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that expense is not just land cost, it's
Right.
restoration cost, and it's management, long-term management
Right.
endowment cost,
Right.
which oftentimes is worth more than the land value,
Right.
depending on where you are and what the long-term management actions are. So that is also certainty, though, right? That's certainty from Fish and Wildlife's perspective, which is certainty from lesser prairie chicken perspective.
Right.
That habitat is going to be maintained. It's going to stay good, healthy grasslands, and the chicken can use it far into the future. The flip side of certainty in this context, though, is this idea of the grand bargain, where you don't have permitting certainty, you have deregulation certainty if you do it right.
Right.
And that, of course, is the idea that we could use our Programmatic Conservation Banking Agreement, which establishes fish and wildlife standards for lesser prairie chicken habitat and conservation standards for that habitat. And we could make a huge federal/private investment, a partnership of sorts, into several 100,000 acres worth of conservation. The number we're using currently is 250,000 acres, coincidentally timed with this 250th
Right.
birthday of America. And if you had...
So that'd be 250 for 250.
It would exactly be 250 for 250. And so if we were lucky enough to have an executable 250 for 250 program in action, we could permanently get the bird off the list.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to worry about permitting certainty because you don't have to worry about a permit.
And maybe, I know we covered this in a previous episode, but just in case folks didn't see that, you might just recap like the timing of where we are in the listing evaluation again on the bird relative to this idea of the grand bargain. Like how do those two things work together maybe?
Right. Okay, so a quick review of the roller coaster ride. 2014, the bird was listed. 2015, the bird was delisted by court decision.
16.
16?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So 2014, birds listed. 2016, birds delisted by court, not settlement, but decision.
Right.
Then the birds finally proposed for listing again and formally listed in 23,
Yeah.
March of 23, I guess. Immediately, Permian Basin Petroleum Association files a lawsuit. 3 states' attorneys general.
NCBA was involved in that too.
NCBA was involved in that. Yep. Then 3 state attorneys general for the red states in the range filed a lawsuit. Ultimately, there was a court settlement that delisted the bird again, and that actually officially just happened 6 weeks ago or so.
Yeah.
But unofficially, call it August of last year.
Yeah.
And so part of that settlement was a commitment by Fish and Wildlife to reach a new listing decision because the old one was thrown out because they did something wrong. So they're going to redo it. And they promised to have it redone by November 30th, 2026. So to your point, what we're trying to do is put together a plan and the money to fund that plan and show significant progress towards that plan by November 30th, 2026.
Right.
And our proposal is a couple of demonstration transactions because this is a unique model that we're proposing to use here, which would be a reapplication or a slightly different application of existing NRCS program. And we would do a couple of demonstration transactions, one here in Kansas with Gardner Ranch, which is an approved conservation bank, one in New Mexico with Lost Draw, which is another approved conservation bank, and then a third one in Texas at our Tomahawk Conservation Bank.
Right.
So 3 different transactions to show that this works across multiple NRCS regions, across multiple states, and we'd have about 10% of our 250,000 acre goal in those 3 transactions. If that all clicks and it all works, I think that gives Fish and Wildlife Service what it needs to write its determination of not warranted or something similar. It doesn't have to be not warranted, but something similar that has a non-regulatory reality on the ground.
Right.
And then we continue to push for the next 225,000 acres in the remainder of Trump's term.
Right. So we could use the model we've proven, which we've sold about 30,000 credits already. Some of that was under our HCP. Some of that was just voluntary transactions. About 2/3 of it was under our HCPs, I believe. And we would use the rest of the credits that we have available now, like this we did this year, and that would happen probably prior to, or could happen easily prior to when the Fish and Wildlife Service finishes their SSA process or listing process, which right now is targeted for November. May or may not hit that, but probably soon after that they don't. Then we'd have a contract, possibly other folks like us well, because Adam's also head of the mitigation ecosystem restoration business association. There could be other players jump in, and we obviously could deliver as an industry the next 200,000 or so acres with a kind of a contract that would be payable upon performance, pay for performance contract with NRCS or something like that.
Yeah, I think actually the way it would have to work is you think of the partnership that we could put together here. If we use the Sustains Act, which is a new act that was passed in 2023, whatever Congress that was, 116th maybe, in 2023, it basically is a private, or let me rephrase that. It's a federal, non-federal partnership program that is geared towards funding and generating environmental offsets, effectively credits. Okay. It literally is meant for purchasing credits. So it would give NRCS the authority to match with non-federal partners to purchase credits. So we can use the NRCS model in terms of the ACEP program, they call it, right? We could use the ACEP program, and we could use the Sustains Act as the framework, and then we could use our Programmatic Conservation Banking Agreement as the credit generation mechanism, right? So those three pieces all fit together. And at the end of the day, we'd have to actually contract with the rancher. So NRCS only pays producers. Okay. So NRCS would contract with Mark Gardner or the Gardner family, in that example, the Kaisers down in New Mexico, the Williams family down in Texas, and they would contract to deliver recovery credits for the lesser prairie chicken. Then what we would do is we would contract with the rancher to provide the services necessary and to use our PCBA to generate those credits. And then we would use their land in order to get the credits from, right? So really it's NRCS, it's the rancher, and it's us. And those three together would create a system that we can generate recovery credits. And the difference between a recovery credit and a mitigation credit is that as soon as the recovery credit's generated, it's retired, no longer available for mitigation. So it's not an offset to future impacts. It is basically a credit to the good of the chicken moving forward.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. So John, you've got a lot of experience in North Carolina working in a fairly competitive and healthy mitigation market for streams and wetlands. How do you see a market being driven? Because 250,000 acres is a lot. And we've done a lot in the last few years, but we certainly haven't scratched the surface of 250,000 acres. We've got maybe 40,000, depending on how you count it. How do you see this working in a 2-year time frame to get 225,000 acres? How can we utilize the market to generate that?
I think that this is a bold, disruptive solution to an environmental conundrum of how you get a whole bunch of the mitigation needed in a really quick amount of time. And I just give you by story. In North Carolina, the Department of Transportation wanted to get advanced mitigation for a whole range of 10-year forecasted construction that was going to impact wetlands and streams. And they came up with a plan to spend $200 million on preservation land, and I'm sorry, $100 million on preservation and $200 million on restoration, and opened a competitive bidding process for anyone that could meet the standard of, do you have an approved mitigation site that hits the criteria, and you are deemed a qualified respondent, and they got in excess of all the numbers that they needed for the mitigation. So I think it would be very easy to get all the qualified participants that have been in the habitat conservation banking space for the past 20 years, as well as many that would be waiting to get into this if they saw that the opportunity was there.
Yep. And I think ultimately what we have to do is make our PCBA available, which means we're kind of a gatekeeper on these projects. So we could invite our industry peers to bring projects to us. Mm-hmm. And if they are suitable, good location, good habitat, then okay, we'll use our PCBA to generate the credits on that site.
Why is it so important? I mean, I get in these debates a lot with different folks, NGOs, state, federal folks, industry folks. You know, we always talk about standards are important performance. In this case, the standard is the guidance that our PCBA meets, which is the 2014 guidance. Why is that important? Why can't we just go give a bunch of Farmville money around to the NGOs, kind of like business as usual? Like, why won't that work, Adam? I mean,
well, right now, NRCS has that same ACEP program. Mm-hmm. It's available across the plains. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it doesn't work, it certainly works locally, on whatever ranch accesses the ACEP program. Great. But when it comes to the chicken, it can't just be a ranch here, a ranch there, a ranch there. Mm-hmm. And it certainly can't be 640 acres here, 160 there. Mm-hmm. It has to be 25,000 acres plus all together, right, at a minimum. And really, I think our target should be at least 50,000 acres. Right. And that is a stronghold. So if you're going to use these government programs to generate strongholds, you have to focus them. And right now, ACEP is available across all of the Great Plains. And that's fine. I'm sure the Great Plains should do that. But if we're going to hit this deregulation hurdle, and we're going to hit 250,000 acres by the end of Trump's second term, then what we have to do is NRCS has to say, lesser prairie chicken habitat represents grasslands of special environmental significance. Mm-hmm. And if they do that, it switches ACEP from a 50% call share to a 75% call share. Right. The other thing they need to do is dedicate a significant percentage of the ACEP funds to lesser prairie chicken habitat. So don't just make every dollar available based on a competitive bid kind of a process. Instead, say, you know what, we're going to make 35% of our ACEP program, we're going to make it available every year. We're going to dedicate it to chicken habitat in particular. Right. And if they do those things, then I think that gets us to a point where the federal government is putting up 75% of the money it takes to get to a not warranted listing decision. And that is unprecedented.
They could actually stick. I would say that's a great point. The other thing I would say, the reason the services standards are important is because if you're nerds like us and you actually read things like the species test assessments and all this court mumbo jumbo, look, the other programs, despite a lot of effort and a lot of money and a lot of enrolled acres, haven't delivered. I mean, the chicken numbers aren't getting better. The habitat losses continue, and the service has to count things that meet its standards. So if the recovery credits are purchased and they meet the services standard, which will require some level of upfront investment, which is why the mm-hmm. private sector can play a key role. These ranchers, like, you don't have to worry about what's being counted or not. Like, these acres will all be counted in this SSA and future SSAs.
Yeah, the other problem with, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love what you guys are talking about. And I think that especially the 250,000 acres concurrent with the 250th anniversary of the country's founding, And we live in an age of disruption in so many different areas and sectors. I was talking with a friend earlier this morning about media. There used to be 3 television news channels when we were growing up, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's long gone, disrupted with the gazillion channels and gazillion different types of formats. Technology is constantly evolving, and we're in a niche that I wouldn't say the regulatory apparatus has embraced disruptive change the way that it should. And it oftentimes defaults to what it's done in the past and look to, we'll give you more money to do more fencing, or we're going to find a way to not really solve the problem, but kind of pretend like we're trying to solve the problem.
Right.
And that doesn't work anymore. And we've got a great opportunity, I think, with the current political environment, regardless of anybody's, political affiliation. I think both sides should recognize we need some disruptive change in how we solve problems like this. And what you're describing with this 250,000 acres, 250 and 250, I think is exactly that. And I'm curious whether or not you guys, do you think that the environmental regulatory folks that would have to embrace this are capable of doing it, I guess?
On the government side of things?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that is the biggest hindrance. Yes.
They got to think outside their box, don't they?
There's 2 things there. There is Fish and Wildlife Service, which I think is probably where you were going with that, right? The guys and gals that actually decide this is a conservation project.
And it's like my sense is they want to do the right thing. They want to get to a good outcome, but they just don't quite have the time or the tools to know how to do it.
That's right. Yep.
All NRCS, yeah, I agree that their challenges are, they for this type of program, which is really a very sophisticated conservation commercial transaction, that's not really their forte. They deal in practices and stuff like that. But I will say, our family works at NRCS down in Ozona, Texas, who most people don't know what that is. But we've got a great guy down there who works with us. So, they do have good relationships with landowners in some places, but this is just such a complicated thing because of the commercial and the business aspect of it. It's, we obviously believe our forte is we can lead that and they can be good partners, and it's not something in their, kind of their bail house that they're used to doing.
Right.
And the service, look, I think both these organizations, bureaucracies they've got some bright stars, but they are encumbered by their systems and their process. And we've got to find a way for us to work together to where hopefully we're leading and those bright stars can shine and be given some delegation of authority by their superiors, so we don't have to go through 16 desks
Yep.
in order to get this stuff done. But if we can do that, we can move it forward and accomplish it for sure.